Hello, everybody. It is August 18th, 2026, here in the United States of America. I hope everyone out there is having a fantastic week. I hope everyone out there had a great weekend. I apologize for the lack of content over the past week. I think it's been close to a week since my last video. It's now the busy season where I work at. It usually runs between midway through August to midway through November. During that time period, I'll be working 45 to 50 hours a week, depending on how busy we get on any particular week. And it's a little more difficult, along with family obligations, to be able to produce 3 or 4 videos a week on a reliable schedule. But I will do my best to put out content reliably and at least get those 3 to 4 videos out a week. So just bear with me here. We're going to get back on track. Things are going to slow down a little bit next week too. There's also extracurricular activities with my children being in school. So there's that as well. But anywho, let's get down to the topic at hand tonight. And I don't really have a dedicated topic I'm going to talk about with the Ukraine-Russia war, or what's happening between the United States, Israel, and Iran, or what's happening in the Middle East as a whole, or just in North and South America, or just geopolitics, anything happening geopolitically around the world. Don't really have anything dedicated to say about any of that tonight. I'm just kind of waiting to see how things unfold over the next few days, gather some more information, and I'll get back with a dedicated video about one of those topics. But anywho, what I do want to talk about today, and this is going to be a fairly short video, is the one major advantage that the United States has over its other two chief rivals, or any other power wishing to become a great power and to eventually rival the United States. The one unassailable advantage the United States has, it seems almost like provenance actually, is geography. Let's take a look at the geography of the United States of America. The United States is in a unique position where it faces really no threat of any kind of physical invasion of its territory because of its geographical location. It's right in between the Pacific Ocean on its west coast and the Atlantic Ocean on its east coast. It has a weak neighbor to the north and a weak neighbor to the south. And there is really no potential rival for supremacy of its hemisphere within South America. Brazil is a large country, sure, with I would say probably the second best military in the Americas. Very large manpower pool to pull from, but Brazil is dysfunctional, it's corrupt, and it is a very long way from becoming any kind of major regional power that can exert its influence over South and Central America in a way that would push the United States out of those regions. I actually don't see that happening. So the United States, I would say, firmly dominates North, South, and Central America, if not by force of arms or the threat of force of arms, but by subterfuge and influence. Make no mistake, Canada will never have a government that's openly hostile to the United States. The United States would never allow for it. It has its ways of making sure this doesn't happen that don't include military action. Same thing with Mexico. Despite the friction between the United States and Mexico, I would say the United States still holds significant sway over what the Mexican government does. Mexico does not have any armored forces to speak of. They have armored cars. They have a military that seems to be geared more towards fighting cartels, and actually does fight cartels more often than anything else than it is for actually fighting some kind of conventional war against another military. It's not geared towards that. And I think the Mexican government knows full well that the United States would never tolerate a Mexico with a strong military. Canada has armored forces, sure, but they have a very small population in relation to how big their country is. Their armed forces isn't massive. They don't have a massive manpower pool to pull from. Yes, they have an air force. Yes, they have tanks, but again, the numbers of these vehicles pale in comparison to what the United States has. So the United States can easily dominate its neighbors within this hemisphere, with its own economic, political, and military will. The United States can levy sanctions against any country here that it chooses to levy sanctions against. It's done so with Cuba and Venezuela in the past. Right now, I would say it's attempting to put Cuba in an economic chokehold to force change in the country to bring about a government that's openly friendly with the United States. Venezuela was the only other country really in this hemisphere with an antagonistic relationship to the United States. And, well, the United States, using its military and economic leverage, seems to have paid off quite a few people within the Venezuelan government and successfully captured Nicolas Maduro and brought him back to the United States for trial. Make no mistake, this was an inside job. Let's be honest. Everybody knows that. And no country in this hemisphere, despite any deficiencies or issues the United States might currently have within its military, none of these nations would dare actually, attempt to fight back against the United States in any meaningful way. The United States knows that. It can kind of throw its weight around within this hemisphere. Brazil, while a part of BRICS, sure, I can guarantee you, no matter who's in power in Brazil, the United States will do everything that it can to make sure Brazil can never fully pull its way out of out from under the United States' sphere of influence. It will never completely cut itself off from the U.S. dollar or U.S. influence. And it needs the U.S. because the U.S. is a major trading partner. So, why is this such an advantage for the United States? Well, the United States, again, doesn't have to actually worry about being invaded by any strong neighbor. Let's look at the two chief rivals that the United States currently has on the global stage. And I'm not saying these countries are enemies of the United States, but they are chief rivals. Let's be honest here. These are the three preeminent powers: the United States, China, and Russia, in that order, with, I would say, India not falling too far behind, and Japan also being in contention for one of the world's 10 greatest powers. Now, if you look at China, China has Russia to the north. It has to consider that in its foreign policy dealings. It has Japan, which in the past has had a very poor relationship with China. Something that happened in Nanking, I'm sure, would remind everybody of Japan's former policy when it came to China. You have South Korea, which is allied with the United States and has a potent military. Japan has, and always will have, I would say, a very potent military, even if it's mainly for defensive purposes. I think they're just looking for an excuse to be let off the leash once more. And then India borders China to its southeast. You would say that's southeast. Excuse me, sorry, southwest. I'm very tired. Listen, I've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning. My brain is not braining right now, but just bear with me. Anyways, India borders China. India is a formidable regional power. China has to consider that in its foreign policy dealings, and that does affect the way it does conduct itself. China does conduct its foreign policy a bit more careful than the United States does, again, because it is surrounded by countries that are potentially allied with the United States and have powerful militaries in their own right. Now, Russia to the north is not allied with the United States, but there has been a contentious relationship between the two powers in the past, although I would say now, while there still might be friction on certain issues, it's not nearly as contentious as it was during the Cold War. So these attempts to, I guess, spark some kind of potential conflict between the two, or to antagonize the relationship between Russia and China by saying that China plans to invade and conquer Siberia for more land for its growing population, is just an effort to cause ire between the two. And this is just part of the chess match. You know, intelligence agencies do these things to cause problems, but no, I don't think there's any real threat of China invading Russia, but Russia is another great power to the north of China. So China is bordered by strong regional powers and a great power to the north. Now, Russia is bordered by, well, Europe, and Russia has a very contentious relationship with most of Europe at this point, especially the Baltic states, obviously Ukraine, Poland. They've had issues with Georgia and countries in the Caucasus. You have the Chechen wars in the 90s, which Chechnya is a part of Russia now, obviously. But Russia's foreign policy often revolves around issues on its western border with Europe. Obviously, the Ukraine-Russia war happening currently is a result of years-long tensions between Europe and Russia, and the great game, chess match, so to speak, between NATO countries trying to do what they can do to contain a resurgent Russia and neutralize any kind of any possibility of Russia firmly becoming a great power that could truly exert uncontested influence over Eastern Europe. And also, Russia has been invaded in the past through Europe. Obviously, it was dragged into World War I. You have various other conflicts with European countries throughout the last few hundred years. I mean, dating back even 1,000 years or so. Obviously, World War II, where the German army and its allies made it to the gates of Moscow. So Russia does kind of find itself in a very vulnerable position. It's a very large country, although they do have the largest population of any country in Europe. I would say the population that they have does make it difficult to defend every piece of their territory at once. So no, Russia has to keep this in mind. Russia is not a fortress. It's very vulnerable on its western border with Europe. It knows that. It's always been vulnerable on this border, which is, I think, the reason why they have the foreign policy that they do towards Europe. It's reflexive action because of this. They also don't want to lose their bases in the Black Sea, which is why they seized Crimea. So Russia conducts its foreign policy around its geographical vulnerabilities, and also Russia in the past was invaded by the Mongols. And this area was not a very easily defendable region for the Russians. They've always been invaded from the east and the west, and this is, I think, part of their national psyche. They know it. They conduct their foreign policy around preventing this again. And then you look at Europe. I haven't mentioned them. They want to collectively become of great power to rival the United States, Russia, and China economically and militarily. That's what I believe the EU is attempting to do. But if you look at Europe, Europe is bordered by Russia. And as I mentioned before, this has always, I think, influenced the policy of European nations and Russia towards one another, always preparing for a future conflict or potential future conflicts down the road. Europe, though, unfortunately, is resource poor, especially for modern militaries. It's been resource poor for a long time, which was much of the impetus behind the German invasion of the Soviet Union. Yes, Lebensraum was one of the reasons they gave, but also to seize much needed oil. Europe is always starved for energy. It needs energy imported pretty reliably and consistently because it can't produce enough of its own, and it refuses to build enough nuclear power plants. So Europe finds itself in a very difficult position where it must try to maintain peaceful relations with countries that they've been historically antagonistic with or feel animosity towards. You have Turkey, obviously. Turkey will never be allowed into the European Union, but they need energy. Russia, up until recently, was a country that Europe relied on pretty heavily for energy, and they still do in many ways, but they're attempting to gain energy independence away from Russia and rely more on the United States. But the United States charges an arm and a leg for liquid natural gas. But so to bring things back, I don't have a script for this, so I'm just kind of rambling. I apologize. But to bring things back to the United States doesn't have to worry about these issues. The United States has every single resource that it could possibly need. It doesn't really have to worry about aggressively defending its borders because there's no one to defend its borders against. The United States has to worry more so about the influence of lobbies within their country, spying, the influence of spies and foreign businessmen. That's their chief concern. Really, it's not necessarily defending the homeland. And the United States, because of its geographical isolation, can afford to make more mistakes with its foreign policy and behave a little more aggressively than other nations can. If it makes a mistake, like I would say many think the invasion of Iraq is, it can simply just pull out of Iraq and come home, really consequence-free. any of these nations the United States is currently in conflict with in the Middle East. Iran cannot reach the shores of the United States, nor would they really dare to try. The United States knows this, so if really everything goes south in Iran, the United States can simply just pull out of the Middle East and conduct business as usual. Sure, it would be a national embarrassment, but it wouldn't be an existential crisis for the United States. Whatever president is in power at that time may face some pretty severe political backlash, but the United States itself will not suffer in any meaningful way. This is a very unique position for a major world power to have, and I would say the United States is an empire. It's an island fortress surrounded by two massive oceans with a weak neighbor to the north and a weak neighbor to the south. It's given it the ability to conduct itself in a way where it doesn't really have to take the threat of any kind of invasion of its own soil into account. And I think that's why the United States has felt inclined to intervene in so many places away from its borders, because it's fairly safe to. If things go wrong, if things go sideways, sure, it's embarrassing, but the United States can always just leave. China really can't afford to do that. Russia can't really afford to do that. And Russia did do that, and now it's been mired in a 4.5, 5, or almost 5-year long war in Ukraine, where, no, I am not somebody who thinks this war is nearly as catastrophic for Russia as many people make it out to be, but I'm sure they would prefer to not be mired in this conflict and that it had ended within a few months. Russia can't afford to just pull out of Ukraine and clean its hands of the matter, because Ukraine borders Russia. This is an existential issue for Russia and Europe as a whole. No one in this conflict is just going to disengage from it on a whim, because the consequences are directly on their border. The United States doesn't have this issue. The United States could completely disengage from Europe. No issue at all. The United States could probably just disengage from Taiwan. Really no issue at all. The United States will never disengage from countries in North, Central, and South America. But as far as the rest of the world, the United States can kind of conduct itself as it sees fit. And sometimes I think this causes the United States to conduct itself fairly recklessly. But anyways, I don't want to ramble too much tonight. Just my point is, if you just look at the geographic position of the United States, this, I think, is its main advantage over its two chief rivals. It just does not have to worry about threats on its border. The invasion of the United States is essentially impossible by sea. No one has the logistical capability of crossing this massive ocean, taking land, and seizing land on the United States. There is not a single European power with the potential to do so across the Atlantic. I think these things are much more difficult than people realize. Like the war in the Pacific, where the United States was actually gearing up to invade Japan, required the entire industrial might of the United States directed at this war. The United States was building hundreds of ships, carriers, transport ships, destroyers. Just this level of effort placed into this was just, I think, not something that people can really comprehend, and not something that any country could really easily pull off without incurring a massive amount of debt and economic issues. So again, the United States is fairly safe where it's located, and this is actually a pretty unique position that I think the United States holds over really any other empire in history, for the most part. Maybe the Romans, for a brief period of time, were in an unassailable position within Europe. They always had to deal with the Parthians and Persians, but within Europe, up until, I would say, later in the later stages of the Western Roman Empire specifically, they can kind of conduct themselves as they saw fit at a certain extent, and really face no real meaningful consequences at home for it, which is why Rome had so many misadventures abroad that ended in failure. But the empire just kind of trucked along, as it always had for at least a while, because of its, I'd say, geographical isolation from any other major power in the world. But anyways, that's really all I wanted to talk about today. If you like this content, please consider subscribing to this channel. Drop me a like, and also check that bell notification to make sure you're still notified, to be alerted when I actually do post a video. I should be back Thursday with another video. My upload schedule this week should be Thursday and Saturday. Yeah, so today, Thursday, and Saturday will be my upload schedule. I might produce an extra video on Friday if I get time, but right now it's going to be 3 this week, and then hopefully back to 4 next week. But anyways, I hope everyone out there has a fantastic night, and until next time.